if you didn't need any more encouragement to wake up and smell the roses and have some coffee and get yourself going, Peter Bleksley is here to share with me the home of common sense and the great looking forward that we're about to do, Peter, over the next 4 hours, of why this is the home of common sense and why Keir Starmer is an absolute utter disgrace.
Good morning, Governor. Thank you for having me, because according to the Prime Minister of this once great nation,
yes,
I am clearly a far-right bandwagon jumper.
Of course you are.
Because for many, many years, I've held deep concerns about these grooming rape gangs that have caused incredible harm and damage to young children.
To thousands of young children.
Children whose lives will be blighted forever. Some lives have been lost as a result of this action. Let's please remember that at all times. And because I harbour deep concerns, like so many other millions of people in this country, that makes me, according to Starmer, a far-right bandwagon jumper. And what an insult.
It really is. And what a telling situation yesterday when I watched his appearance yesterday while he was supposedly going to be announcing these, sort of revolutionary new manoeuvres for the NHS and how they're going to get rid of a load of wasteful appointments and they're going to get people seen quicker and they're going to get people fixed up quicker, none of which is basically going to happen at all. But he's instead got caught in the weeds of this kind of obsession of his that anyone who criticises anybody from what we might call another culture, particularly a Muslim culture, is somehow a maniacal Nazi. I mean, he might as well have said that.
Well, let's remember what lies at the very heart of all this outrageous behaviour that was allowed to continue for so long, that created so many victims, so much harm, so much damage to hundreds upon hundreds of families, not only the children, but the families and their communities, was cowardice. Absolute cowardice lies at the very root of all this. And that cowardice was on behalf of people working in social services, social workers and the such like, people working in the police service, wheresoever that may be. And of course, we know that there are at least 50 towns affected by this appalling behaviour. Cowardice for people because they wouldn't stand up and confront this criminality for fear of being called racist. What a nonsense.
Absolutely.
Because you see, those who occupy the corridors of power, whether it be in policing or in local authorities or in amongst so many political parties, would have you believe the lie which says all of us, the entire nation, live harmoniously in a wonderful multicultural nirvana. And for millions of people, particularly in cities and suburbs, that is simply not true.
No. And it never will be. Let's have a look at what Starmer actually said yesterday. I mean, you might have to sort of do a double take and see if you can actually believe your ears and your eyes as you watch this. But have a look.
And when politicians, and I mean politicians, who sat in government for many years, are casual about honesty, decency, truth and the rule of law, calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics, because a robust debate can only be based on the true facts.
Well, the true facts are that the last report that was done, the last inquiry that was instituted and reported back in 2022, did not have any of the facts at its command that we now have. And it didn't look into the main problem whatsoever. The word Pakistani was mentioned once in a 400-page report. I think Telford was mentioned once in the report. Rotherham was mentioned once in the report. The whole report was not at all a proper investigation of what happened nationally, because what we now know is far more interesting and far more revealing than anything that was ever in that report. So the idea that we rest on that report and we make the recommendations that that report recommended is nonsense.
Alexis Jay's report was into child sexual abuse per se as an overall kind of thing. So it ranged from something that a stepfather might do when he inveigles his way into a family because he wants access to children, so that kind of paedophile, to something that somebody working for the clergy might do, to something ranging to what a teacher might do, for example.
Or something at the BBC, perhaps.
Indeed.
Right.
As opposed to a thorough forensic, deep probe into
looking under the bonnet, effectively, of what was going on.
Gangs did of men who were overwhelmingly of Pakistani origin, Muslim rape gangs, and what they did throughout the country, the length and breadth, wheresoever they operated. That was not the report that we were presented with.
No, of course not.
Not at all. And that is what is needed. So when people say we need a full, public, judge-led inquiry, perhaps, that has the power to compel people to turn up and give evidence, they are not bandwagon jumpers.
No.
They are deeply concerned members of the public who want the truth to be told.
Exactly right. And he's basically had a go at everybody, from Elon Musk, who he says is a dangerous, poisonous individual, to Maggie Oliver, who is a genuinely former Manchester police officer.
Friend of mine.
A friend of mine as well. She's going to be on the show later on today, basically saying that she's a bandwagon jumper. She's absolutely outraged by what he said. He said that basically Kemi Badenoch is looking for attention. I mean, how dare he talk about the children of this country who he had a responsibility for when he was Director of Public Prosecutions. He says that he had a few people prosecuted. He says that it was down to him that any of them actually ever faced any kind of trials at all. But incorrect, I'm afraid, Sir Keir Starmer, because he's also admitted in the past that he didn't do enough and that he let people down, because he did.
When Maggie Oliver joined Greater Manchester Police, she had a bit of life experience behind her. I think, and Maggie will correct me, but I think she was in her early 40s.
Yeah.
So you would think in this modern age, somebody that policing would embrace because of her life experiences, bringing that into policing. And Maggie fairly soon identified, having served for some years, she then went into specialisation of child sex abuse investigations, and she identified this appalling gang rape behaviour by these Pakistani Muslim men. And she flagged it up to the very highest level that she could within Greater Manchester Police. In other words, the Chief Constable. Maggie then had a tragedy in her life, and she stepped back from policing for a short while and then returned. And when she returned, the promises she had been given that action would be taken, arrests would be made, were all turned out to be entirely false. And Maggie, in order to be able to tell the world the truth, courageously resigned from her job without a thought about what she was going to do for a living, without a thought about her own personal financial situation. She went, no, I'm going to be principled, I'm going to tell the truth. And for Starmer to try and badmouth a national hero like Maggie Oliver tells me everything I need to know about that man who lives in number 10.
Exactly right. He's written a piece for The Sun today, which opens with this line: "There is no crime more vile than child abuse. The way that grooming gangs, many of them Asian..." What do you mean, many of them Asian? How about you call it as it is? They're Pakistani grooming gangs, men who have come from a particular part of Pakistan to prey on our children. He says they've preyed on vulnerable girls in some of our poorest communities is sickening. He says, basically, that my fight to change the way that the prosecution service operated is a matter of public record, making sure the men responsible for these despicable acts were brought to justice. Well, some of them were, but an awful lot of them were not. You know, we talked to Samantha Smith, who's another victim, just at the end of last week. The people who abused her for year upon year upon year when she was as young as 9 years of age have never faced justice. Not one of them has ever been before a court, right? So for Keir Starmer to say that he brought these prosecutions and sorted it all out is a complete and utter nonsense. He says far-right voices have tried to rewrite history. Ludicrous claims that Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips and I are part of the problem, not the solution. He says, in truth, Jess has spent her entire life battling to keep women and girls safe. Well, really? Well, she's not doing it now because she's refusing to have an inquiry.
The National Crime Agency currently have an operation ongoing into trying to secure further arrests and convictions for exactly these sorts of crimes.
Because they're still going on.
It's 2025, Starmer.
Right.
Wake up, listen, and see if you can actually develop a better relationship with the truth.
Yes, he's got very thin skin. He doesn't like it. And have a look at how Labour actually operates and how they react when somebody from the opposite side of the divide politically has a go at them. This is Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp yesterday in the Houses of Parliament.
It is not far right to stand up for victims of mass rape. And smearing people.
Order.
It's those concerns.
People want to hear the statement. Chris Philp.
Smearing people who raise those issues is exactly how this ended up getting covered up in the first place.
So there you have the Labour benches jeering at Chris Philp as he says it's not far right to be concerned about these issues, and raising these issues is not a far right episode. They all think that's ridiculous and they think it's funny, and that's why we are where we are.
If this country, and when I say this country, please forgive me, viewers and listeners, I know you've got far more common sense than many of those politicians we've just watched behaving appallingly. But if these politicians, if the establishment continues to fail to listen to the public mood, to grasp the concerns that people have, then, and I'm not condoning or justifying in any way, shape or form, but the riots, the disturbances that we had of last summer, those kind of things will, sadly, be repeated.
They will.
Because there are certain people who will take to the streets and commit crime. I wish they wouldn't. But there are certain people who, when their dissatisfaction within boils over, that they can't control it anymore because they think lies are being told, the truth is being suppressed. That's what people get really irritated about, the truth being suppressed. Then certain elements of society, criminal elements, will take to the streets and more disturbances will happen.
And Keir Starmer doesn't seem to grasp the fact that not only is he now the most unpopular Prime Minister that there has ever been in this country, but that almost everything he says is completely and utterly disregarded by the people of this country, because they don't believe a word he says. They don't think he's fit for the job. They don't think he understands what Britain is all about. And what they see is a man who would rather smear you for being far right than help you to prosecute people who are doing terrible, ghastly, evil, awful things to young girls. Even now, even today, even right now, probably at 6:20 in the morning, there will be somebody in one of these ghastly towns up north where this is going on, and nobody's stopping it. No one is stopping it.